So there is a controversial group that is going around banning books. And I had yet to say anything about it. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do. And they've got several chapters in other cities, in other states. Somehow they've grown. But I've read a little background on them, that they're a grassroots conservative organization. So they're founders of a controversial Moms for Liberty group. So what they've been doing is they've been banning books. A lot of the books that I've noticed that they've been banning have to do with minority and people of color, authors that are people of color, and leaders that are people that are African American leaders. And a lot of what they go on, how they started in the beginning was when the pandemic took off and they had these mandates about wearing masks. And this is an American conservative nonprofit group called Moms for Liberty. And so they have basically been an organization that has campaigned against COVID-19 restrictions in schools, and including mask and vaccine mandates, and against school curriculums that anything that mentions race, discrimination, CRT, anything having to do with inclusion, groups that have been protected, LGBT people, anybody that is in that group, yes, and black people, um, the history of African Americans in the country here in America. And they go on the premises that the books that they've been banning are anti-American, anti-patriotism, even some of them they claim that are anti-Mexican. And they've targeted Martin Luther King books by Toni Morrison, and a whole host of other books that they've kind of targeted. And what they do is they look at anything that has to do with discrimination or racism, uh, pictures showing about historical events that took place in the 60s and 70s, and maybe beyond, and even after, post civil rights movement, during the civil rights movement. They claim that it's anti-American when really it isn't about America. It's talking about how people were treated here in America. Um, and then, I was reading where they said anti-Mexican. I'm thinking, well, you have ICE, you know, immigration customs enforcement, and we hear all the time about how children are being locked in cages, and nobody's saying that that's anti-Mexican, but yet you're the same groups, conservative groups, that pass laws and approve it all the time. So I don't understand where this is coming from. What they're doing is trying to put a wedge between oppressed groups, and that's what I feel that they're doing personally. I feel like they're trying to pit one oppressed group historically against another oppressed group that has been historically oppressed, and they want you to fight so they can step back and start making their laws and approving things, and basically reversing everything that people have worked so hard to change, to make things easier. Hopefully, it really hasn't been this easy, because there's been so many challenges, even with the changes that have been made. Because you have these people who are dead set on trying to reverse these things, the acts and the laws that have tried to make more inclusiveness and more people be able to live here in America and be able to exercise their freedoms. And they've been doing everything, and some of these politicians that are conservative, it's not all, but there's been some that have passed laws or acts or wanted things to pass that have made things a lot harder for people. And voting rights, you know, that has been one issue that has been really a hot button topic. Abortion is another one that's been a hot button topic. There's been some other things that have happened recently, with housing. That's been a big issue. And so there's a lot of things that you're trying to do to reverse all of the hard work that people have fought so long and hard, protested, to try to make changes so that other people can live a little more in stable conditions, or at least have their basic needs met, or some rights, be taken more seriously than just being, disregarded, not having a voice or say so, being able to vote in places so you don't have to drive miles away or rely on the bus, necessarily having places in your area, polls set up so that they're not closed, and it inconveniences people, and also these laws that they set up, or rules that resemble, uh, some of the old discriminations that we've seen or heard of or read about, where people had to take tests just to vote. It's crazy, and so I feel like a lot is being done to like bring us back, to those times. There's been segregated situations where schools, I've been reading, where some schools, they've had people segregate the children. It's sad. Um, it's like you're seeing all of the old horror unfold all over again. And now you're also seeing these school shootings where you've got parents buying guns as Christmas gifts for their kids and telling them not to get caught. But somehow they find books telling kids about the historical horrors of the past so that you don't make those mistakes again and you don't repeat those horrors. Somehow these groups, these conservative groups, have band together to ban these books because they find them to be un-American. Or should I say unpatriotism? It's unpatriotism and un-American. So here you have a football player. He's one of the greatest football players, and he can't play football anymore because he takes a kneel for a protest in a silent manner, nothing violent, not inciting any riot, but he's banished from his career. And you don't call that un-American? Because he's standing up for the rights of people who have no voice, and for many decades, they've been ignored about the violence and the sanctioned killings that have happened in our communities. And you have people that all they want to do is watch people play ball and ignore the killings. You don't want to call that un-American. And so I guess if there's books chronicling those incidences, those are books that you're going to ban too. So I just want to reiterate that. So the Moms for Liberty, somehow they're able to make wiki, and they're able to have their name on the internet because they've been making a bunch of noise, and that's all it is, about how they want to ban books. So there's been several articles. There's been also some push to try to go in and combat critical race theory 101. And so they're saying anti-Mexican, huh? Well, guess what? Some of the things that you claim are anti-Mexican, and you are saying that, but critical race theory has Latin history in it as well. And you're contradicting yourselves. And so it just doesn't make sense. It behooves me of how people don't really read and they don't understand history, or they don't want to understand it. And then if you look at Martin Luther King, he did a lot of work with Cesar Chavez, who is Mexican. Um, it's sad because they want to put people against one another, and they've been doing things um, to, create divisions, and they're pretty good at it. And so it says Martin Luther King Jr. and Cesar E. Chavez are two historic figures who are an inspiration for today's civic education, and they both wanted to fix segregation and believed in equal rights amongst all. Both activists chose nonviolent protest routes to end segregation. Chavez, which is Cesar Chavez in the Mexican American and the church, aim to raise awareness and question about the best use of charity and the role of religion in bringing about social change. Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail responded to the criticism about his civil rights movement on religious grounds. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter of Birmingham, which was supposed to address 8 clergymen, but it spoke to a national audience, especially his Christian and Jewish brothers. He looked into just and unjust laws by bringing up many points that supported his theory in many ways. His ability to illustrate the harsh and insensitive behavior towards people of color exceeded his intelligence. So the letter was seen as a majority turning point, or a major turning point in the civil rights movement. He believed to take direction and action for African Americans, but in a nonviolent way. So he also compares how they are being treated to how the Jews were treated and by Hitler, and how it is not acceptable. And so he writes about all the humanitarian or unhumanitarian or humiliation and abuse that they had faced throughout their lives. And so how one day the injustice will be exposed. And so he believes it is up to him and the people to stop all of this and make a better free world. So he usually never responded to the criticisms, but it was a waste of time because these were men of good, and he decided that he would give them answers to their statements. And so it was reading here. It's through papers, owls, free essays, things like that. And so it's just, even though I believe this may be an essay, but it is true a lot what is said here. And so there's other stuff that you can look up that has to do with Martin Luther King, responses to Moms for Liberty. Okay, so a Tennessee education report. And so this is by Andy Spears. So Williamson County parent group One WillCo has been organizing, speaking out in favor of diversity and inclusion in schools. Now the group is out with a public statement in response to the national group Moms for Liberty. Their campaign against the so-called critical race theory. So it's raising the roof, of course, of criticism. That is. So here's a statement, and so it's down here. So I'll just read part of it. It says, ahead of one of the nationally coordinated Moms for Liberty misinformation events being held locally and advertised as a Critical Race Theory 101, local group One WillCo releases the following statement. So all our students have the right to have a safe learning environment. Children in our community have been told to go back to Mexico. and have been called the N word, and parents continuously share stories with us that their children have heard even worse in their school. So these um, uh, lived experiences here in Williamson County cannot be described as a safe educational environment by anyone. So when groups try to divide us by labeling any conversation about race or racism as critical race theory, they silence our live or living experiences of racism, our lived experiences that we have, which I would be included in that. I've lived with these experiences as well, so I can relate to this article very much so, and the history of discrimination that affects our lives today. So when a group is opposed to having hard conversations on topics like diversity and equity and have no proposed action to protect children like mine for being recipients of harassment based on their color of their skin, we cannot solve the problem. So we must stop sticking our heads in the sand or using false labels and instead work together to combat racism in the schools so that we all can all come together as a community for shared prosperity. And so this is by Ravita Raman, a co-founder of the One WillCo parents in the community, to share the story. So we all agree that the students should be judged based on their character and not on their color of their skin. So this is Tisdale High School mother, um, Tisdale High, a mother of three in WCS. But unfortunately, our society in here in Williamson County, we haven't arrived there yet. And so during this school year, my second grade child brought home an assignment that linked a picture of a black child to the term scarcity. Okay, so when I raised the concern of a black child would be in the pictorial representation of a negative adjective, um, the school administrator responded that in other parts of the world, things are scarce. Okay, so of course, this school administrator is very good, a good person trying to do the best for the students, and was embarrassed when I brought up this whole thing. But this shows that he was not equipped to check his bias and how it may be influencing how children were being taught, or that his bias indicated the stereotypes that he held and had nothing to do with the picture that was represented or the lesson being taught until I pointed it out to him. So basically, he had a picture of a black child and it said scarcity, and that was the lesson. And so this is what these women, the mothers, what do they say, the mothers of liberty, they want that type of teaching. You know, they want people to not know what's going on, not have any background in the history of what has happened to people of color, and so that they have this type of stuff being taught in schools. So that's what brings up these type of crazy lessons, scarcity, and then these views, and it's instantly stereotypes of black people as not having anything or being scarce, you know. And then you have children being taught this who maybe they're not black, of course, but they read this, and then that's where you are teaching these biases, and you're not teaching, you know, that there's certain regions, there's different places in Africa. It's not just one place, you know. I've seen where some people thought that Africa was one place and people lived in huts. And they had no knowledge, no background of the history whatsoever. And whatever they saw on TV was all they had. And they still didn't understand why people were disgruntled about past wrongdoings, because of what they had been taught is that black people were criminals, and you know, maybe cops, what they saw in cops, you know, and that was it. Um, which they don't really show that much anymore. I guess they do show it maybe on other channels, you know, reruns and maybe new stuff. I don't know, but that's what they're trying to change. So it says, when I raised the concern, going back to the article, the black child would be the pictorial representation of a negative adjective. The school administrator responded, in other parts of the world, things are scarce. So, of course, this administrator is a very good person, but trying to do the best for the students, and he was embarrassed when I brought it up. But this shows that he was not equipped to check his bias and how it may have influenced how children were being taught, or his bias indicated stereotypes as well that he had held and had nothing to do with in the picture that it represented or the lesson being taught until I pointed it out to him. So I have heard voices say that noticing and pointing out instances of racism and indoctrinating our children, but I would argue that teaching kids that the color of their skin is linked to being foreign and scarce sounds more like indoctrination than learning and teaching about an honest view of history, of course. And I know we all believe in prioritizing the safety and well-being of education and development of children, of all our children here in Williamson County. So this was said by a Dr. Ama, and I may not, I'll say nottage, okay. A mother of two, okay. So you're gonna see a still photo of a protest that is happening. So this is a real hot button topic. The critical race theory and school boards have been threatened because of parents that are in some of these areas that claim that they think that it's teaching to hate white kids, to teach about history and what has happened in America is un-American. Yes, I said that. It's crazy, but which really it is American. It's a part of American history, unfortunately. The good, the bad, and the ugly is a part of American. Not teaching about what happened to the Indian culture is un-American. That is un-Mexican. It is. It's un-African, un-black, un-American, African American. It's un-everything. To just wipe out history and not teach about it's un-American. That's un-American. To not talk about what happened in America, basically. So it says, I know we all believe in prioritizing safety, well-being, and education and development of our children, all the children here in Williamson County. So Edmondson Elementary assistant professor of medicine at a local hospital. That's who this person is. And I'm grateful for the national climate, which is more open to having honest discussions about race and racism in America and the goal of equality for all. Nonetheless, I'm utterly exhausted by who is constantly trying to ignore and minimize our stories. I agree with you, and misrepresent the scope of the premise of critical race theory, so thereby shutting off any productive conversation and progress. So yet I will continue to advocate for my children and all children in Williamson County, not only for my duty as a parent, but also that we can move forward towards equality in a community. Okay, so this is Williamson County community members right here. Okay, so this was updated. It says a majority role of the church is to be conscious about the community. So this is Reverend Dr. Kevin Briggs, pastor of Franklin Community Church in Williamson County. Denying systemic racism in our country is denying history. Exactly. And putting all conversation about the race and history of racism in America as a critical race conversation. Putting all the conversation about race and the history of racism in America as critical race theory is just a strategy to silence and stop important conversations that lead to true unity. So from the genocide of the First Nations people to the enslavement of Africans. Exactly. That's anti-Mexican. And these women are going around, well, let's move on. Saying, so, they don't want you to talk about what happened in history. That's what it's clearly. And then now they're going around on this war path and witch hunt to ban books that mention anything about historical actions that happen, crimes that happen in history. They want kids to not know stuff, so we can continue on this madness that we see now with the school shootings and all this craziness. So anyway, it says there were forced encampments on our Asian neighbors, and there were mistreatments of people of our southern borders. And systemic racism was and is a major part of history in America. And so the only way forward is acknowledgement, confession, and repentance that leads up to action, just like our personal relationships with Jesus. And this is a person that is religious, of course, but I have to respect the fact that they're trying to do the work of the greater good, which is noble. One of these actions those actions we must take as a country is teaching our children our sins and mistakes so that they do not repeat them. Exactly, even he gets it. So the sin of racism needs to be taught in the schools in order to bring us to a path of healing. And that's what you do, is face the tragedy, face the horrible event, and say, this is what we don't do, this is what we don't want to repeat, and let's try to work this out. You don't run away from it, you don't hide it, you don't sweep it under the rug and let it fester. Because what do you do when you keep sweeping things under the rug? The rug doesn't get flatter, it gets bulkier, it gets bigger, it has more junk under there, and then other things crawl under there, and it just never gets better. It gets worse and worse and worse until eventually there's no room for you to move, and you've got all this crap under there that you've never dealt with. That's what they want us to do. And it gets worse. It doesn't get any better. So as a United Methodist pastor, father of 2 children in Williamson County school system, I hope that my children and the teachers are able to instruct them about our nation's history with both critical and constructive lenses. So this is coming from Reverend Brandon Baxter, Associate Pastor in the West End of United Methodist Church in Nashville. So it is a simple fact that throughout our history, the sin of racism has informed much of our culture and many of our systems. Racism is alive and well today. Some people see this, okay? And the fact that Williamson County parents referred to COVID-19 as the China virus. Tell me now, is that nice to do that? No, it isn't. So at Monday night school board meeting is the proof that we have to work to do on bullying based on race. And so the silence teachers exploring such basic truths does a disservice to our children, those young persons that will be ones responsible for shaping more of the hopeful, equitable society in the future, of course, whatever's left of it, because a lot of stuff's happening now. We don't know. It's very uncertain. So for all people, as they continue to perfect this union in which we live, so in order to do so, they must have access to the free market of ideas, and so including the uncomfortable truths as well, to challenge and grow beyond what once was or has been, I believe. And so it goes on. And so I don't want to go on any further. And so these are basically, I just wanted to read to you some of the thoughts and some of there's 64 shares, okay? So I could go on all day. I almost read most of them. But I wanted you to read that in good faith, there are a lot of people that are really concerned. They even have someone mentioning here about Ruby Bridges, about that school segregation that happened, and how it changed a lot of lives to desegregate the schools and create integration. And so some people don't like that. They feel you have some people that want things to be the way they used to be, and then you have some people feel like if we had left it the way it was, then maybe one group would have been able to thrive. But I would say to you this, and that We had Black Wall Street, and you see what happened with that. Read the history on that. We did have places where it was only, a black society, and with that, if you have hateful people out there, you really think they're gonna allow for you to just go ahead and thrive by yourselves and have your own city and your own government and your own this and that, and they're not going to intervene, and there's not going to be some kind of drama or something in it. I feel like it's sort of like sets up um, destruction, because if you hate a particular group so much, and then you decide to push them in a corner, or they decide to just flee and say, okay, if you hate us, we'll just go in this corner and we'll just make our own life. Those people that hate you, they're not going to leave you alone. They're just, well, they're all over there, so we could just drop a bomb over there. Or we could just make them sick. Or we could raid the town and invade the town and burn it down to the ground. That's what happened. And when you hear about the Black Wall Street and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when you hear about the Rosewood Massacre, when you hear about a lot of the other stories, there's so many of them. It had worked, so just that's why it's so important to read. And so, but when you have people that work together, learn about each other, begin to learn about each other's culture, then you're hoping you have less confusion, because not everybody is going to be about trying to separate individuals, for crazy biases and stuff. So anyway, I just thought I would put that out there. But this group has gone to great lengths to ban books, Mothers of Liberty. And so they also tried to go into Tennessee, and they tried to do this, and it didn't really work. It was unsuccessful. Um, uh, yeah, so the Moms of Liberty, or Moms for Liberty, they seek to ban Martin Luther King Jr. book, and so the Tennessee education, um, they basically they denied that. Group of mothers in Tennessee want to ban school teaching about Martin Luther King. And so I guess it was for the fact that they showed the scene. I was reading a little bit of it. They showed the scene in history where the dogs were being sicked on people. This was during, I believe there was a photo, and this woman, she's been on the news, and she's a part of this group. She claims she wants her kids to learn how to live with other people, yet she's dead set on, basically, Moms for Liberty seeks to ban Martin Luther King Jr. book, Tennessee. So Tennessee Education Department refused it, and so the group appears to suggest that slavery and Jim Crow were positive achievements, and like unity and overall improvement of our country. Let me read that again, so that those of you who are asleep on this group, wake up and see what is going on in this country, that people want to reverse things and put us back into almost the 50s and 60s, where we had no inequality as people that are black, people of color, people that are Mexican, people that are from anywhere else. This group appears to suggest that Jim Crow, slavery, both were positive achievements. Yeah. Yeah, that's what they're saying. So this is Robin Steenman. She's the head of Moms for Liberty in Williamson County chapter. Okay, so they have chapters. I want you to hear that. So these groups are not just in Williamson County. So I will read this part of it, or maybe I don't know how long or how, but this is really sad. These people are, and let's read this. So, David Badish, Nashville, Tennessee Department of Education is refusing to investigate a far-right group claiming that a second grade curriculum, which includes books like Black civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is anti-American and anti-white, but on a technicality. And so the Williamson County, Tennessee chapter of the group called Moms for Liberty had filed an 11-page complaint with the state. Okay, so these people are working tirelessly to put these books out of circulation. They're claiming that the classroom books and the teacher manuals reveal both explicit and implicit anti-American, anti-white, and anti-Mexican teaching, as the Tennesseans report. Okay, and so the relentless nature of how these divisions or divisive stories are taught. Okay, they claim. Okay, and so the group's complaint continues. Okay, so they claim it's anti-American, the Mexican, anti-white, and so that's I feel like they threw that in there so they can put Black people and Hispanic people against one another, as if we don't have some problems already. But notice that we live in the same communities, we go through some similar issues, and we've in history you've seen that, like there were many indigenous people that were slaughtered, and like you see there are millions of Black people that were also slaughtered and killed, and there's so many stories, and you could just go on, you know and just the same, Blacks were put in slavery, and Mexican people were put they were lynched as well. And I still say that they're treated horrible, with the cages, putting kids in cages. It's sick. And so that's, you see that, and you have, I know what people are going to say, well, there's different presidents and they had all these different, you know, but I feel like you have people in the back that are stopping people and blocking people from making improvements. There's not much that they can do. And then when they try to do it, they're blocked on every corner. And when they're blocked from even creating healthcare plans, that tells you right there that they're really not all completely in charge. That's somebody in the background calling the shots. And they're watching everything you say and do. There's only so much you can say and do. Yeah, I'm referring to Obama. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I think, he, created DACA, which was an excellent program, which these same conservatives have tried tirelessly to try to get rid of. And so that's my say on that. And so the complaint is this is the signed local group chairperson, Robin Steenman, who Reuters has called an Air Force veteran, white mother of three. Okay, so it claimed, of course, which is, I kind of feel like she's on the right wing tip. So it claimed that Williamson County Schools District is violating a law, right? And so it goes into that. And so what they submitted, these are the books that they want to ban. Now I want you to hear this. So I submitted Williamson County Schools in violation of the state law with teaching of the Great Minds PBC, Wit and Wisdom, WW English Language Arts, ELA, English Language Arts Curriculum, second grade, Module 3, Civil Rights Heroes, which includes the following anchor text. So Martin Luther King Jr., The March on Washington by Frances E. Ruffin, Ruby Bridges Goes to School, My True Story by Ruby Bridges herself, The Story of Ruby Bridges by Robert Coles, Separate is Never Equal by Duncan Tonato. The classroom books and the teacher manuals reveal both explicit and implicit anti-American, anti-white, anti-Mexican teaching. That's what they claim. Okay. Um, this Mothers for Liberty. So additional, it implies the second grade children that people of color continue to be oppressed by oppressive, angry, vicious, scary, mean, loud, violent, rude, and hateful white population. Um, Attachment 1, teacher's manual that teaches that racial injustice is 1960s exists today, of the 1960s exists today. Okay. So Seaman also appears to suggest slavery and Jim Crow were positive achievements like unity and the overall improvement of our country. So for her, she feels slavery was an improvement and Jim Crow was an improvement. Her comments to some may sound straight out of the Fox News for right-wing media reports, and they claim that the curriculum amounts to a heavily biased agenda, one that makes children hate their country and each other and themselves. So a narrow and slanted obsession of historical mistakes. This is basically out of her writings, of course, reveals a heavily biased agenda, one that makes children hate their country. It's basically what I said. So rather than be concerned that these events actually happen, Steinman appears to be suggesting that teaching that they happen is anti-Americanism. So basically what she's saying, don't teach about history in America. Don't teach about slavery, what happened in America. Don't teach about what happened to the indigenous people. Don't teach about the lynchings. Don't teach about don't teach about any of it. Just teach patriotism. Just teach about American. Teach about the Pilgrims. Teach about how Columbus discovered America. Teach about stuff like that, which isn't true. And it isn't American at all. And the only thing that happened in America that has anything to do with Americanism in it is that they enslaved a lot of black people and Indians and changed their languages and indoctrinated them with their religions. And then they slaughtered a lot of indigenous people and took their land. They did discover what they stole from them. That's what they did. So rather than be concerned of the events that actually happened, Steinman appears to be suggesting that it's anti-Americanism. So there's more crap here. I'm not even going to read it. So Moms for Liberty says that learning Martin Luther King Jr. on the March on Washington is emotionally traumatizing for Tennessee students. Okay, I'm done. So you can read it at your leisure if you feel like it. Look at this woman's face. She's been on the news. She doesn't hide herself, of course, and she thinks slavery and Jim Crow were improvements for America. They're improvements, but she didn't want you to talk about what happened because that's not American. But they're improvements for America, right? Okay, that's how sick this is, this thinking. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that. So yeah, this is, it just, when you see this kind of stuff, it just gets more and more sick by the moment. You know that people need help, seriously, but this is the ways people are thinking. They actually have chapters, this group, Moms for Liberty. Yeah, so I'm going to leave this video with Moms for Liberty believes that they should get rid of Martin Luther King books, Ruby Bridges books, any books having to do with slavery and Jim Crow, although they believe that slavery and Jim Crow was an improvement for American life. But it's un-American to talk about it. Think about how crazy that sounds. Yeah, wrap your head around that for a moment there.